What would you do if one night changed your entire life? If you discovered you were carrying the child of a billionaire, a man who made you feel like nothing more than a mistake? Emma Lawson, an exceptional executive assistant at Hawthorne Industries, had never let personal emotions interfere with her work. But one fateful night shattered the boundaries between her and Grayson Hawthorne, the powerful yet controlling CEO. The morning after, he made her feel as though it had all been a mistake. With a shattered heart and a resolve she wasn't sure would last, Emma walked away, leaving behind the man she once dreamed of and a future she never expected. But life had other plans. A secret was growing inside her, a tiny life that Grayson knew nothing about. Now, Emma faced an impossible choice: keep the truth buried forever or reveal it, no matter the consequences. If you were in Emma's shoes, would you keep the secret or would you face the truth, even if it meant reopening old wounds? The dim city lights reflected off the glass walls of Hawthorne Industries' top floor, casting long shadows across the near-empty office. Emma remained at her desk, fingers flying across the keyboard, determined to finish the last set of documents for the night. Strands of her wavy hair had slipped from her carefully pinned-up style, betraying the control she fought to maintain. "Still here this late, Lawson?" The deep voice startled her. Grayson Hawthorne stood in the doorway, his broad frame silhouetted against the backdrop of the city skyline, his steel-blue eyes, sharp and calculating, locked onto her. But tonight, there was something different. Less guarded, more raw. "Just wrapping up the Blackwood contract, Mr. Hawthorne." She kept her tone steady, refusing to let her heartbeat betray her. Grayson stepped closer, the faint scent of his cologne wrapping around her like a whisper of danger. "You never forget anything, always one step ahead." His voice dropped slightly, quieter now. "But tell me, is this just a job to you?" Emma looked up, and it was a mistake. His eyes, usually cold and distant, now burned with something unspoken. The space between them was too small, the air thick with a tension that threatened to consume her. Was this just another power play? Or had she misread everything? She should step away, end this before it begins. But when his fingers brushed against her cheek, reason slipped away. And that night, in the storm of emotions neither could contain, the line between them disappeared completely. Morning light spilled through the glass walls, casting a golden glow across the office. Emma blinked awake on the leather couch, warmth from the night before still lingering on her skin. But the moment she turned her head, reality crashed down like a tidal wave. Grayson was already dressed, impeccable in a sharp black suit, every trace of last night erased. "Good morning, Lawson." No warmth, no lingering touches, just Grayson Hawthorne, CEO of Hawthorne Industries, as distant as if nothing had ever happened. Emma pulled his discarded jacket from around her shoulders, clutching it briefly before setting it aside. "Good morning, Mr. Hawthorne." Her voice was steady, betraying none of the storm inside her. He sat down at his desk, his eyes fixed on his laptop. "Is the Blackwood contract ready?" The question was a knife to the gut. Last night had meant something to her, but to him it was just a lapse in judgment, a mistake to be forgotten. Emma clenched her fists beneath the table, nails digging into her palm. She had spent the night in his arms, believing, just for a moment, that maybe she meant something more. But reality was colder than the morning light spilling across his desk. She would not beg. She would not break, not in front of him. Without another word, she stood, gathered her shoes, and walked out, leaving behind a man who had locked away his heart the moment the sun rose. Time passed, and Emma built a new life for herself, far from Hawthorne Industries, far from Grayson Hawthorne, far from the past she refused to dwell on. A new job, a fresh start. She had promised herself she would never allow him to break her again. But then, something changed. Morning nausea hit without warning. Her body felt different. At first, she blamed stress, the sleepless nights spent trying to forget Grayson. But as the symptoms persisted, a quiet fear took root inside her. She checked her calendar, and her stomach dropped. Late. Not by much, but Emma had always been as regular as clockwork. This wasn't normal. Her hands trembled as she walked into the pharmacy, purchased a pregnancy test, and returned to her small apartment. She stared at the results, her breath caught in her throat. No, this couldn't be happening. Her hands trembled, the test slipping from her grasp and clattering onto the bathroom floor. The world tilted on its axis, crashing down on her in a way she hadn't expected. 2 lines. Emma's hand instinctively moved to her stomach, where a tiny life was beginning to grow. A child. Grayson's child. She had never imagined herself as a mother, never planned for this. But now she faced an impossible choice. Tell him or keep the secret forever. The months that followed weren't easy for Emma. She had chosen to walk away from Grayson, but that didn't mean the pain disappeared. Pregnancy alone had never been part of her plan. The relentless morning sickness, the sleepless nights from aching joints, the quiet moments of fear when she first felt the baby kick, she endured it all, without anyone by her side. Without Grayson. There were nights she curled up on her couch, hand resting on her belly, wondering if she had made the right choice. But while Emma struggled, Grayson wasn't doing any better. He buried himself in work, deals, meetings, endless distractions. But nothing filled the void Emma had left behind. He lost count of how many times he reached for his phone, ready to call her, only to stop himself. And the nights when he unlocked his penthouse, when he stepped into his empty bedroom, he was reminded that no one was waiting for him anymore. The bed was too large, the silence too loud. He would stare at his phone for hours, her number still saved, his finger hovering over the call button, but he never pressed it. He wondered, was she okay? Where was she? And most importantly, had he lost her forever? 8 months had passed. Emma had adjusted to her new life, a remote job at another corporation, far away from anything related to Hawthorne Industries. She had convinced herself she didn't need Grayson, that she could do this on her own. But fate had other plans. One morning, as Emma scrolled through the news while sipping her ginger tea, a routine to manage her lingering nausea, one headline nearly made her drop her phone. Hawthorne Industries acquires the city's largest healthcare network, including St. James Hospital. She froze. St. James Hospital, the very place she planned to give birth. Was this just another business deal? Or had Grayson found out? She told herself it was a coincidence. The city had thousands of patients. There was no reason for Grayson to ever know. But fate always finds a way. A week later, when Emma went into labor earlier than expected, she had no choice but to be admitted to St. James. As she was wheeled into the emergency room, she heard the nurse ask for the baby's father, and in the haze of pain, the words slipped from her lips before she could stop them. Grayson Hawthorne is the father. The secret she had held for so long had just unraveled in an instant. What? The deep, gravelly voice cut through the chaos, laced with shock and anger. Even through the excruciating pain, Emma recognized it instantly. Grayson. She turned her head, gasping for breath, and saw him standing at the entrance of the ER. His usual flawless appearance was slightly disheveled, tie loosened, hair mussed as if he had run all the way here. But it was his eyes that stopped her. They held a storm of emotions. Shock, fury, and something else. Something deeper that she couldn't name. "What did you just say?" His voice was eerily quiet, as if his mind refused to process the words. He stepped forward, slowly this time, his usually composed exterior cracking at the edges. "I have a child." He exhaled sharply, shaking his head before looking at her again, this time with something raw, something broken. "And no one thought to tell me?" Emma gripped the side of the hospital bed as another contraction ripped through her, tears spilling over. "Grayson, not now." "Not now?" he repeated, laughing bitterly. "You've kept this from me for 8 months. You think I'm going to wait another 8 minutes to talk about it?" Before Emma could respond, the fetal heart monitor started beeping erratically. A nurse rushed in. "The baby's heart rate is dropping. We need to take her into surgery immediately." In an instant, the fury in Grayson's eyes disappeared, replaced by raw fear. "Is she okay? Is my baby okay?" His voice no longer belonged to a ruthless CEO. It was the voice of a man terrified of losing what mattered most. Emma looked at him one last time before the pain overwhelmed her. "I'm sorry, Grayson." And then everything went black. When Emma opened her eyes, the bright hospital lights made her blink rapidly. A dull ache in her abdomen reminded her that the surgery was over. But then a single thought cut through her mind, making her sit up in panic. "Where's my baby?" Before the nurse could respond, a familiar voice answered. "He's okay. You're both okay." Emma turned her head, and her breath caught when she saw Grayson sitting beside her. His expression was no longer filled with the anger from earlier. Instead, there was something else: concern, exhaustion, and a kind of pain she had never seen in him before. "How long have you been here?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. Grayson didn't look away. "Since the moment they took you into surgery." Silence stretched between them, because they both knew that today, it wasn't just a child that had been born. It was the truth they had both been avoiding. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was lower now, almost broken. Emma clenched the blanket in her hands. "Because I was afraid that to you our baby would only be an obligation, just another calculated part of your life." Grayson was silent. Then, softly, he whispered, "Emma, I'm not here just for him. I'm here for you." Emma stared at Grayson, searching for a lie in his eyes, but there was none. No cold CEO mask, no carefully constructed distance between them. "What are you saying?" she whispered. Grayson took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to admit something he had never dared to before. "I made a mistake that morning. I thought pushing you away would make things easier, but it didn't. It was the stupidest thing I've ever done." Emma felt her heart tremble. "I looked for you," he continued. "After you left the company, I searched for you, but you disappeared." Tears burned at the corners of her eyes. She had run to protect herself, but she had never known that Grayson had been searching for her too. Between them, a wall had just crumbled, but was it too late to rebuild what had been broken? Emma sat frozen, Grayson's words echoing in her mind. "I looked for you." She didn't know what to say. For months, she had convinced herself that Grayson didn't care, that she had been nothing more than a mistake to him. But the truth was something entirely different. A warm hand covered hers. Grayson squeezed her fingers, his deep blue eyes filled with an unshakable determination. "I can't change the past, Emma, but I can change the future, if you let me." She parted her lips to speak, but before she could, a small cry sounded from across the room. They both turned toward the bassinet, where their son stirred awake. Grayson rose, lifting the baby into his arms with a tenderness that made Emma's heart ache. When he turned back to her, holding their child, his gaze was steady. "Let me do this right, not just for our son, but for you." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a dazzling engagement ring. "Emma Lawson, let me spend the rest of my life proving to you that you were never a mistake. You were the best thing that ever happened to me." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but this time they weren't from pain. "Yes," she whispered, "I'll marry you." The winter sunlight streamed through the grand windows of the Hawthorne Hotel, where the wedding was set to take place. Snowflakes drifted softly outside, painting a picture straight out of a fairy tale. Emma stood before the mirror, the elegant white gown hugging her curves, her body still adjusting after childbirth. But her gaze wasn't on herself. It was on the bassinet nearby. Alexander, her and Grayson's son, slept peacefully in a tiny tuxedo, looking like a miniature version of his father. The door creaked open, and Olivia, her best friend and maid of honor, peeked inside, eyes gleaming. "You ready?" Emma took a deep breath, then smiled. More than ever. As she walked down the aisle, Grayson's eyes never left hers. No more distance, no more doubts, only love. They had made mistakes, they had hurt each other, but today none of that mattered anymore. Because today, they became a family. Sunlight streamed through the grand windows of the luxurious penthouse, casting a golden glow across the room. Emma sat on the plush carpet, holding on to a chubby little boy who was determined to stand on his own. "Come on, Alexander, you can do it," she encouraged, her voice filled with warmth. Alexander, now almost a year old, blinked up at her with his big, curious eyes, his tiny hands gripping her fingers for support. He wobbled uncertainly, but, to Emma's astonishment, he stood up, all on his own. "Grayson, get over here quick," she shouted excitedly. From his office, Grayson all but sprinted into the living room, something rare for a CEO of his stature. When he saw his son standing unassisted, his entire face lit up. "That's my boy." He knelt down, arms wide open. "Come to Daddy." Alexander giggled, hesitated for a moment, and then took a step. 1 step, 2 steps. And just as he was about to reach Grayson, he tumbled forward. But before he could cry, Grayson scooped him up, spinning him in the air. "You did amazing, little man," he laughed, pressing a kiss to his son's forehead. Emma watched them, her heart overflowing with joy. There was a time when she thought this moment would never come, when she believed Grayson would never be part of their son's life. But looking at him now, she knew he had changed. "Do you remember the first time we met?" Emma asked suddenly, leaning back against the sofa. Grayson arched a brow. "How could I forget? You walked into my office looking like you owned the entire company." Emma laughed. "Well, I had to. You were the most arrogant man I'd ever met." Grayson feigned offense. "Then why did you fall for me?" She tilted her head, smiling softly. "Because I realized that behind all that arrogance, there was a man capable of love." Grayson went quiet for a moment, then wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. "And I realized that behind all your strength, you were the woman who made me want to be a better man." Emma rested her head against his shoulder, soaking in the warmth of the man she loved. Alexander stirred in Grayson's lap, his tiny fingers gripping his father's shirt, as if he too wanted to be wrapped up in this perfect moment. Outside the window, the city moved at its usual relentless pace. But inside their home, time seemed to stand still. They had fought so hard to get here. But now, at last, they were a family,